Showers coming at times for northwest England, North Wales and certainly western Scotland. The odd one for Northern Ireland, but many southern and eastern parts having a dry, fine day on Wednesday. It will be breezy and that breeze will bring a chillier day. Temperatures, though, still around about average for the time of year, 10 to 11 degrees Celsius. Some rain trickling into Northern Ireland late on, and that will be around across western Scotland on Thursday, but a lot of dry weather through the rest of the week and into the weekend. Staying mild as well, but signs of things turning colder through the weekend.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to the briefing here on GB News. Today we're talking about terrorism, trains and talks. That's right, we're going over some of the implications of COP26, whether the EU is kowtowing to China. We're also talking about high-speed rail in the north and whether or not that's being cancelled. And of course, the terror threat level and what can be done to combat the scourge of terrorism in the United Kingdom. All that and more in 5 minutes after your news.
Hello, I'm Simon Pusey. This is your news at 9 o'clock. The 4 men arrested in relation to the Liverpool terrorist attack have now been released from police custody. The bombing suspect, who died in Sunday's taxi explosion, has been named as 32-year-old Emad al-Swa-Almin. He moved to the UK from the Middle East several years ago and later converted to Christianity. The driver, David Perry, escaped with minor injuries. He's been praised for his actions, with a fundraiser set up to replace his destroyed car. Meanwhile, the terrorism threat level in the UK has been increased to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. Minister for Security and Borders, Damien Hines, told GB News people should be as vigilant as possible.
If you see something that doesn't look right, something that makes you suspicious about something, just to go that extra, mentally, go that extra distance to say, yeah, I should report that. And if it turns out to not be significant, then nothing's been lost.
NHS leaders are calling for social care staff to be given cash bonuses to stop them leaving for other jobs in the winter. They want the government to offer £500 incentives so they don't take Christmas work in hospitality, supermarkets or firms like Amazon. Those working in care homes must now be double vaccinated. The sector already has more than 100,000 vaccines. Azim Rafiq is appearing before MPs this morning to discuss allegations of institutional racism at Yorkshire County Cricket Club. The club's former player initially voiced his claims in September 2020. An investigation by Yorkshire concluded Mr Rafiq was a victim of racial harassment and bullying, but nobody was disciplined. The club's former chairman, Roger Hutton, who quit in the aftermath of the row, will also give evidence to the Digital, Culture, Media and Sport Committee. Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng has apologised to Parliament's Standards Commissioner for questioning whether she should keep her job in a row over MPs' conduct. Last night, an attempt to scrap the controversial standards reforms that sparked the sleaze row was blocked by a Conservative MP. The motion endorsed the Standards Committee's report, which concluded Owen Paterson had broken lobbying rules, leaving the standards system intact. But Tory MP Christopher Chope objected.
We now come to a motion relating to the Committee on Standards, and I call the Minister to move formally. Object. Objection taken. Wow. Mr Wishart, point of order.
Mr Deputy Speaker, we've just passed probably one of the most significant motions that this House has considered in the past 2 weeks, motion number 6 in the Committee on Standards. There has been no opportunity to debate this.
Somebody shouted object. I took the objection. It will now be up to the government then to reprogram that particular motion.
The Prime Minister's father has been accused of inappropriately touching a Tory MP and a journalist. Caroline Noakes MP said Stanley Johnson smacked her on the backside in 2003 and Alva Ray claimed he groped her in 2019. Mr Johnson declined to comment but says he has no recollection of Caroline Noakes at all. The majority of school staff, parents and students believe GCSEs need to be reformed. A poll by the Headmasters and Headmistresses Conference found that more than half say GCSEs require serious reform and 40% believe they need some adjustment. It reported significant concern that both the curriculum and assessments are falling short in servicing the needs of young people. UK rents are rising at the fastest pace since 2008. Property website Zoopla reported rents in September were 4.6% higher than a year earlier at £968 per month on average. The signals the strongest growth in 13 years. The property company said demand is continuing to outstrip supply and putting an upward pressure on rents. A group of Insulate Britain activists could be jailed for allegedly breaching court injunctions. The High Court has so far issued 5 injunctions banning road blocking protests on the M25, around Dover Port and on major London roads. Those in breach could face a maximum penalty of 2 years in prison or an unlimited fine. 9 people will appear at the High Court this morning. Insulate Britain says it intends to continue with the protest until the government agrees to insulate homes. And Harry Kane has scored 4 times as England thrashed San Marino 10-0 to secure World Cup qualification. That means the Tottenham striker goes level with Gary Lineker on 48 England goals. Only Sir Bobby Charlton and Wayne Rooney are ahead of him on the all-time scorers list. And I'll be back with the headlines in around half an hour. For now, it's back to the briefing with Tom Harwood.
Hello and welcome to the briefing here on GB News. Now, the first story that I want to talk about today is one that is incredibly pertinent and indeed on the front page of many newspapers. Now, this terrorist bomber that was killed when his device exploded in the back of a Liverpool taxi was not known to the security services, we learn. Ahmed Swellman died when his device detonated in the vehicle as it was pulled up to the front of Liverpool's Women's Hospital on Sunday morning. An asylum seeker from the Middle East who had his original application to stay in the country rejected in 2014 and reportedly converted to Christianity in 2017. Yesterday, the threat level was raised from substantial to severe, meaning another attack is now considered highly likely. Well, let's make sense of all of this now with a member of the Home Affairs Select Committee. James Daly is the Conservative Party MP for Bury North and sits on that committee and joins me now. Welcome to the programme. Firstly, should people be concerned about this threat level?
I think we should always be vigilant about the terrorist threat. We've had recent examples of terrorist attacks and the appalling attack yesterday. I think the first thing I'd like to say, Tom, in respect of it, is to pay tribute to David Perry, a very, very, very brave man and an absolute superstar. And the actions he took probably saved many, many other lives.
Certainly that seems to be the case. It's a remarkable story, although a lot of people will be concerned that the bomber in the first place seemed to have some sort of ideology that meant he wanted to kill many, many people. Do we have any indication as to what that might be?
We have no indication at the moment. I think what we've seen over the pandemic period is an increase in the radicalisation of what's called the lone wolf. So a change away from people acting on behalf of or in linking with bigger organisations to individuals, but no individuals who carry out terrorist attacks are truly alone. So as you've alluded to already, Tom, we have information regarding his conversion to Christianity, a previous arrest for possession of a knife, some suggestion of mental health problems. So many, many things that the authorities are going to need to investigate to understand exactly why this individual carried out the attack that he did.
Now, obviously, this attack comes just weeks after one of your colleagues was killed in what was also declared as a terrorist incident. Is the United Kingdom becoming less safe?
I don't think the United Kingdom is becoming less safe. I think that on occasion, terrorists will be able to pose a threat and to carry out attacks. My great friend Sir David Amess, one of the best men in Parliament, paid a very heavy price for these lone wolf attacks, the radicalisation of individuals. But we must all be vigilant, we must all be calm, we must also, as Damien Hines alluded to in the news, if we see any or have any suspicions of terrorist activity or any concerns regarding the behaviour of any individuals, please report that to the police. That's the best thing we can all do to keep ourselves safe. I think we should take reassurance that we've got the best police and intelligence services in the world. This government has given £914 million in funding in the last year to them, £32 million for the establishment of a counter-terrorism centre to keep the country safe and various other measures in place. So we are taking measures to ensure that our security is increased. But again, I must pay tribute to our security services, to counter-terrorism police who work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to keep us safe.
Now, much is being made that this bomber was an asylum seeker. He didn't have his asylum application approved as far as we know. And also on the front pages of many newspapers this morning, the curious story that he apparently converted to Christianity in 2017. Now, I've been speaking to some Church of England clergymen over the last 24 hours who seem to suggest to me that there is a bit of a problem of asylum seekers potentially not being entirely sincere when they seek to convert in order to try and advance their application process. Is that a problem that you've encountered?
It's not a problem I've come across, Tom. I would have to speak to the same people that you've spoken to get an idea of the scale of that problem. As we discussed already, each individual case is based on different circumstances. We need to understand and learn from each individual case. But at the end of the day, what links all of these acts are that they are criminal acts by criminals motivated by different things. We have to understand that to make sure that our protections against further criminal acts are in place. So the background to this gentleman will need investigation. That is one of the strands of the investigation that I'm sure the police are looking into. And if we have to take steps at both the national level and in terms of supporting our police to address these problems, or whether it's the immigration service, we must do that. One of the things that concerns me is that the reports of the device this gentleman was carrying, well, I think it's highly likely that if we were to go on the internet at this moment in time, there may well be some terrorist organisations who are putting out their information which would encourage or at least help other individuals to construct bombs and various other things that would do harm to people. So it's a wide-ranging debate. There are steps that politicians can take. We must do everything possible to take down any information from the internet which is helping these lone wolf terrorists, to give them information to help them construct explosive devices. So it's a wide-ranging investigation. The Home Affairs Select Committee in Parliament will be We'll be we'll be asking questions, making sure that we know the background to this, and legislation will be put in place if it needs to be to address some of the concerns and some of the issues that arise from this case.
James Daly, Member of Parliament for Bury North and, of course, member of the Home Affairs Select Committee, thank you very much for your insight and thoughts on this issue at the top of today's show. Well, listening to all of that was Sam Armstrong, the Director of Communications at the foreign policy think tank, the Henry Jackson Society. And Sam, first of all, we've been hearing a lot about this potential for lone wolf attackers. It certainly seems to be the predominant form of attack that the West has faced recently. This one seemed to be relatively more sophisticated, however. Does that suggest more people might be involved?
Well, that's right. We're using bombs here rather than knives or vehicles, which have become the terrorists' go-to weapons of choice over recent years. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there's other people involved. You might recall the case of the Parsons Green Tube bombing. Again, a young asylum seeker, that time a chap called Ahmed Hassan, attempted to build himself a bomb out of TATP, the same explosive that was used yesterday, committed a terrorist attack all by himself. He too had been an asylum seeker that had lived with perfectly lovely family that had no idea that he was really a very dangerous man indeed.
Are we vetting our asylum seekers strongly enough? There seem to be people who are stuck in this process, many of whom are stuck in limbo for many years, which doesn't seem to be particularly good for them or the security of the nation. What can be done to help this system?
Well, asylum is a very difficult thing to vet. We can't really go into Syria and say, well, how about this chap here? What was he like? Who did he know? Who was he speaking to? It's just not being done. So when we say we're vetting these people, it means that we are asking them questions and we're relying on their answers and we're looking for clear signs of deception. But we are not undertaking lie detector tests. We are not undertaking massive amounts of background research. We're taking people on trust and they fill out a bureaucratic form and a bureaucrat sits there and signs off yay or nay. What is becoming clear, though, is individuals that have been exposed to very dangerous places in their early life, Libya, Somalia and Syria in particular, have all been left so bruised and broken by this experience that many of them have these deep and profound mental health issues that at times, especially when it's mixed with a dangerous ideology, can manifest themselves in people who are likely to go on to commit terrorism. And we all need to be concerned about that.
And it seems to be that there have been more of these cases in recent history. I mean, there was an attack on an MP just a few weeks ago. We spoke about it on this programme. Are we now seeing a greater ramping up of events like this? And what is causing that?
Well, a few years ago, it was sort of felt like the Islamist terrorism problem was fixed. We stopped talking about it. The days of mass casualty events were behind us. MI5 were doing a very good job of getting on top of them. And I'm afraid we sort of took our eye off the ball. That whole pressure of the government going in and dealing with problem areas, getting involved in mosques that I'm afraid at times were preaching things that nobody should approve or agree on. And that energy and that desire to tackle them abated. And as a result, the problem has continued to fester and it grows worse and grows worse and grows worse until it literally ends explosively.
Now, of course, just finally in this conversation, we've seen on front pages this morning that this particular man had converted to Christianity in 2017. Does that suggest that he was potentially a Christian terrorist?
Well, we're going to wait and see what his recent history is, but he hasn't been seen in a church since Christmas Day 2017, and by anyone's record, that's not a great history of church attendance. So Christianity isn't a religion about awards or credit or works or anything like that, but by that record, you've got to have some doubt. There are, of course, allegations that many or some asylum seekers do feign faith in order to seek a bonus in their asylum processes. So we've got to be very carefully scrutinising what's happened for these last 4 years that has seen him go from attending church on Christmas Day 2017 to trying to blow up a cathedral on Remembrance Day 2021.
Fascinating question, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more to come out as the days and weeks progress. Sam Armstrong from the Henry Jackson Society, thank you for joining us this morning on The Briefing. Now, another significant story that is developing this week that the Prime Minister revealed yesterday will be announced on Thursday is the fate of High Speed Rail 3, Northern Powerhouse Rail, as it is known. Well, Kevin Hollinrake is the Conservative Member of Parliament for Thirsk and Moulton, who says that if this new powerhouse rail does not include connections between some of the biggest cities in the north, it will entirely miss the point of the entire project. Welcome to the programme, Kevin. Are you hopeful that some of these reports we've been seeing in the last couple of days may not be entirely accurate?
Well, let's see. We get the detail on Thursday, hopefully. So we'll find out then. But there are concerns. Northern Powerhouse Rail was supposed to be this brand new railway track running from Hull through Leeds to Bradford, critically to Manchester to Liverpool, and that then gave us those agglomeration benefits. Economists call it agglomeration effect, connecting all those cities together, which then created a dynamic which really boosted the economy right across the north. That's what the north's been sadly missing. What I'm concerned about is a downgrade of those plans, which doesn't then have the benefit of a full delivery of Northern Powerhouse Rail.
Now, of course, London and the South East has enjoyed high-speed rail for decades now in the form of HS1, the Channel Tunnel, and all the same. The connection between London and Birmingham is going ahead. It seems that all of the rail infrastructure seems to be benefiting London at the moment. Is this government a government that's truly committed to levelling up if it pursues those southern projects but scales back those northern projects?
Well, it's a number one domestic priority, and I'm concerned that because we've spent a lot through the COVID crisis, of course, I'm concerned that we'll then rein back some of the plans, because this is taxpayers' money. You've got to be careful with it, clearly. You've got to make sure it's value for money. And if you can deliver the same benefits, exactly the same benefit for a cheaper price, then of course we should consider that. It would be foolish not to. But this is really important, because if you try and travel, for example, between Leeds and Manchester, or Bradford and Leeds and Manchester, you've got a rickety train that takes a significant amount of time. Bradford to Manchester is about 40 minutes for a very short journey. And with Northern Powerhouse Rail plans, it was 20 minutes, much quicker. Similarly, into Leeds, 7 minutes, I think the journey would be. So some really quick, easy connections and capacity improvements as well, which then we can put freight on other lines, the Transpennine current route. So lots of capacity benefits here, as well as time-saving benefits. But overall, it means the journey times connects all the cities of the north together, which has that agglomeration effect that London's had for many, many decades, which is one of the reasons it's so successful and so productive. That's what we're looking for. And it's a missed economic opportunity if we don't deliver this in full.
It seems these east-west connections in the UK we're not particularly good at. North-south seems to be fairly all right. At least the East Coast Main Line, the line that I'm very familiar with, seems to be very good. But when it comes to the east-west connections, we're really missing a point. Have we lost our Victorian enterprising spirit? We used to be the centre of the world for these kind of infrastructure projects, and now it takes 50 years to approve a runway at an airport. It takes 20 or 30 years to build a railway. Isambard Kingdom Brunel would be spinning in his grave.
Well, I don't disagree. I mean, I hear lots of talk about, north and south. Of course, I get on the East Coast Main Line a lot as well. It's an hour 49 from York to London. It's a great journey. But there are capacity issues around that, of course. We shouldn't forget that. This is not just about speed. It's about capacity. It's also about inter-regional routes, such as York or Leeds to Birmingham, which currently, again, takes 2 hours. It could take an hour with a full delivery of HS2, including the eastern leg. So, but I tend to agree with you. I think it's an economic fallacy to say that, connecting Leeds or York to London is good for London, not good for Leeds or York. It's complete nonsense, clearly. But I think if we were talking about building the M1 today or the A1 today, we'd be wringing our hands over that too. And clearly that has huge economic benefits to it, connecting these cities together. So we just need, I agree with the essence of what you're saying. We just need to get on with it. In particular, those east-west journeys are really, really important. This is a massive task. I mean, talking about Germany, in my little slip there, The disparity, economic disparity between the northeast and London and the southeast is as wide as it was between East and West Germany in relative terms prior to reunification. That took 30 years and $2 trillion to bring those two economies to something approximating parity. So this is massive stuff. We've got to deliver some big projects in the long term to be able to really narrow this gap.
It's a really important question. Kevin Hollingray, thank you very much for joining us this morning on The Briefing. We look forward to that announcement on Thursday to see what might happen. And I just have to say in that conversation, absolutely hit the nail on the head. Would the M1 be built today? Would the car even be approved? Or would some officious bureaucrat say these things seem terribly dangerous? We can't possibly allow them in the United Kingdom. I wonder if we've lost a bit of that enterprising spirit we had for decades and centuries. Well, moving on to another topic of conversation this week now, of course, it has been COP26 and the fallout of COP26. And interestingly, the way that the European Union acted at that conference has come under greater scrutiny. I'm delighted to be joined now by Patrick O'Flynn, a former member of the European Parliament, to talk a little bit about how the European Union behaved at that final plenary session at COP26. Because, Patrick, there's been accusations that Frans Timmermans, the head negotiator of the EU, seemed more willing to bend to China than the United Kingdom was.
Yeah, well, I think that's true. There have been reports of various horse trading meetings, Timmermans being in charge of the EU's Green Deal, had a caucus of all the EU government representatives, but then was in smaller gatherings, including with India, China, John Kerry, and obviously Alok Sharma too, and seemed much more, let's say, pragmatic than the British government in allowing language to be changed and weakened without China and India at least being put to shame by their proposed changes being read out on the plenary as a whole. So yes, I think it's fair to say that the EU and Timmermans were less green than the British government.
Interesting that the European Union, all 27 member states, sort of have to submit to one commissioner in order to be represented at COP. I wonder if more or less would have been achieved if the UK was still a member of the European Union and we didn't have our own voice on that plenary floor and had to speak through some Dutch commissioner.
Yeah, it's very cumbersome, the EU system of representing the individual nation states, and there are obviously tensions around that. You get anomalous things like several EU head honchos pitch up at the G7, even though individually they're not in charge of a G7 member state. I think undoubtedly, from an environmentalist point of view, the United Kingdom independently being represented and indeed hosting the event was probably quite helpful to the sort of radical green movement. Not that necessarily many conservative inclined voters in this country would think that necessarily a good thing. But yeah, the EU likes to think of itself as being very virtuous and, inverted commas, progressive. But in fact, it can be quite gauche, quite cumbersome, and quite hard-bitten in its approach to international policy.
Become more sanguine at the prospect of these international deals on climate than I was before, simply because the UK's already signed up to most of that anyway. And so getting other countries to do the same seems a benefit to the United Kingdom rather than anything else. But I do want to move this conversation to a bit more of a broad stand, because certain European countries have been accused of sort of drifting from this transatlantic alliance that has been the bulwark of security and economic prosperity for the last century. Countries like Germany looking more to Russia and China in their trade. Is this a problem for the European Union?
Well, it's certainly a trend that I think you're right is happening. Whether it's entirely the fault of those European countries, you could fairly question. I mean, you look at the AUKUS deal and the way that came about. Clearly, France, but also the EU and also the other EU nation states were completely caught cold by that. The EU itself, one of the things that it often happens to it is its cumbersome in reaching international agreements, and the timing can be awkward. So they came up with, for instance, a strategic partnership with China early in 2020, just as COVID was breaking, which didn't look too smart. Obviously, you've got Germany very reliant on Russia for its energy needs, but you could equally accuse American leadership in recent years of letting that go to waste, and also the antagonism between the EU and the UK has meant that Britain's role as a traditional bridge between the US and the European powers has perhaps weakened somewhat as well.
Is there a prospect of things becoming ameliorated between the European Union and the United Kingdom? At what point will our relationships move to normalise? It seems like we're stuck in this sort of post-Brexit tit-for-tat, sort of wanting to get one up over each other. Will there be a point in the near to medium future where we just behave like normal countries, like good neighbours, rather than squabbling siblings?
That's very difficult to gauge, but it doesn't look like it for a good while, does it? It looks like there are important countries in the EU, not least France, that really are quite passionate about the idea that Brexit and Britain must be seen to fail. And you know, that's not a basis for a sound alliance and for good relations at all. And we've had the disputes over fishing, the Northern Ireland Protocol. We're about, I assume, to get all other issues parked, and at some point we'll get a fortnight of intense warning and crisis around the protocol, which I suspect some kind of compromise for the interim will be hammered out. But then I think it will come back in the spring with the Northern Ireland Assembly elections, which again feeds into Northern Ireland Assembly having consent votes at the end of 2024, still 3 years away. Around that particular kind of stone in the shoe. So I think it's going to be a few years yet before it all feels normal. I think the EU's pride was enormously injured by Brexit, and they do, across the Commission and the other EU institutions, still have this idea of being scared about other countries falling out of the EU, and obviously there are tensions with some of the countries in Eastern Europe at the moment, notably Poland and Hungary.
No, certainly this is a fascinating point of discussion, and it does feel a little bit like Groundhog Day all over again when these European negotiations keep coming round. But for now, Patrick O'Flynn, former member of the European Parliament, thank you for joining me this morning on The Briefing, and thank you indeed for watching The Briefing as well. That's all we have time for today. Coming up, it's To The Point with Patrick Christys and Mercy Moroki. I'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. But first, before all of that, let's have a look at the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good morning. A duller day today across Scotland and Northern Ireland, with a bit of rain for a time as well, and blustery. Meanwhile, for most of England and Wales, a largely dry day again, if fairly cloudy. But there is some fog around this morning, quite thick in places as well, so just bear that in mind for the morning commute. This weather system moving into the northwest, though, will bring the rain. Notice the isobars squeezing together as well. So it's been a windy night across the northwest, and it's turning wetter on the west coast of Scotland as well. Some mist and fog, particularly across parts of East Anglia and southern England, but that is steadily going to clear. It will stay predominantly cloudy for England and Wales, but the vast majority will also stay dry. Spell of rain through the middle of the day for Northern Ireland, turning drier through the afternoon. At the same time, a band of really squally showers will pep up in the far northwest. Another pretty mild day, especially in the south. A bit of brightness, could see temperatures climbing easily into the teens. A windy evening then, with further showers coming into western Scotland, turning to snow over the tops of the hills. A bit of patchy rain for northern England and Wales, but again, that kind of fizzles out as it slips further south. And it will be something of a colder night. Temperatures more widely, certainly across the far north, down to single figures, but enough of a breeze to stop temperatures falling too far. On to the details for Wednesday, and a brighter day for the south. Bit more sunshine likely here and some blue sky as well. There will be showers coming at times for northwest England, North Wales and certainly western Scotland. the odd one for Northern Ireland, but many southern and eastern parts having a dry, fine day on Wednesday. It will be breezy, and that breeze will bring a chillier day. Temperatures, though, still around about average for the time of year, 10 to 11 degrees Celsius. Some rain trickling into Northern Ireland late on, and that will be around across western Scotland on Thursday, but a lot of dry weather through the rest of the week and into the weekend. Staying mild as well, but signs of things turning colder through the weekend.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Moroki. We're here all the way through until midday, as ever, with a top show for you, with all the best discussion issues.
Yes, make sure you get in touch with us with your views, as usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll get to those throughout the show. But first, let's give you the latest news.
Hello, I'm Simon Pusey. Here are the latest headlines. NHS organisations have been asked to review their security arrangements after the Liverpool terrorist attack. The 4 men arrested in relation to the taxi explosion have now been released from police custody. The bombing suspect who died in Sunday's car blast has been named as 32-year-old Emad Al-Swealim. The driver, David Perry, escaped with minor injuries. The terrorism threat level in the UK has been increased to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. NHS leaders are calling for social care staff to be given cash bonuses to stop them leaving for other jobs in the winter. They want the government to offer £500 incentives so they don't take Christmas work in hospitality, supermarkets or firms like Amazon. The sector already has more than 100,000 vaccines. Azim Rafiq is appearing before MPs this morning to discuss allegations of institutional racism at Yorkshire County Cricket Club. The club's former player initially voiced his claims in September 2020. An investigation by Yorkshire concluded Mr Rafiq was a victim of racial harassment and bullying, but nobody was disciplined. The club's former chairman, Roger Hutton, who quit in the aftermath of the row, will also give evidence to the Digital, Culture, Media and Sport Committee. New figures show the number of UK workers on payrolls has risen by 160,000 between September and October. The Office for National Statistics say that's up by 0.6% and well above levels seen before the pandemic struck. Despite furlough coming to an end, there was also no sign of a jump in redundancies. And an original Star Wars poster is among hundreds of iconic film memorabilia going under the hammer. Fans across the world will battle it out to bid for items worth more than £250,000 during a 2-day auction. The Empire Strikes Back concept movie poster by Josh Kirby is expected to sell for up to £8,000. And that's it from me. I'll have more on all those stories for you at the top of the hour.
Well, good morning. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's. We've got a show full of all of today's big stories and lots of discussion on the issues you're talking about at home. So here's what's on the menu.
Well, former England cricket captain Michael Vaughan is fighting to save his career as a commentator after a third ex-Yorkshire teammate accused him of racism. Cricketer Azim Rafiq is set to answer questions from MPs this morning about the allegations, and we will be bringing you the latest on that.
Yes, and police investigating the murder and disappearance of teenager Sarah Benford, who went missing more than 20 years ago, aged 14, will today start excavating an area of land in Northamptonshire. We'll be reporting on what could be a promising development in this long-standing case.
And you may remember last week we brought you the story of a terminally ill man who was arrested by police for flashing his bottom at a mobile speed camera. Well, famous artist Banksy has paid tribute to the incident in a new piece of artwork. We'll give you some of the reaction to that as well.
Yes, indeed. We have all of that coming up and much more across the programme. And, of course, you can get in touch with your views as usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, I believe we're actually going to go live to Parliament. Ex-Yorkshire cricket player Azim Rafiq and the county's former chairman, Roger Hutton, are giving evidence to the Digital Culture and Media and Sport Select Committee. Be aware there is likely to be detail and discussion that some viewers might find uncomfortable with strong and potentially offensive language, so we can take you live to that now.
It's a little bit different. Alex Lees was a captain, was a friend, and he's a good person, and I know he had personal tragedies of himself at a young age, so he understood me. We had Jason Gillespie, who's an Australian cricketer and coach, who I felt supported by. Jason left at the end of 2016 and it just felt, wow, the temperature in the room had just been turned up. You got Andrew Gale coming in as coach and Gary Balance as captain. And these guys, for me, they were in Yorkshire through and through, and they, as they call it, the White Rose values were embedded in them. For the first time, I started to see for what it was. Felt isolated, humiliated at times, constant use of the word packy. In 2017 pre-season tour, we were in a place and Gary Balance walks over and goes, "Why are you talking to him? You know he's a packy," or "He's not a sheikh, he's got no oil." And this happened in front of teammates, it happened in front of coaching staff. We were on a bus trip in London to Surrey game, and we went past a couple of men with beard, and it was like, "Oh, is that your dad?" If we go past a corner shop, "Or does your uncle own this?" And this happened in front of, again, Martin Moxon, Andrew Gale, club officials, and it would never got stamped out. Everyone saw it, but because the institution and the environment, it becomes such a norm in there that I don't think anyone thought there was anything wrong with it, and that's probably why some people don't even remember it. End of 2017, we had a really difficult pregnancy, and through that time, the treatment that I received from some of the club officials was inhuman. They weren't really bothered about the fact that I was at training one day and I get a phone call to say there's no heartbeat. Sorry.
Your time, Mr. Rafiq. You wish to break it any moment, please just let me know. There's no hard deadlines today. I mean, I was quite interested by your comment there. I'll probably return more specifics. You said about Mr. Balance. Now, he made great store in his statement where he issued an apology over the fact that you were friends. I think he mentioned as well in the report that you went to have dinner with his family in Harare, I think. And he suggested basically it was sort of a banter angle to the use of the P word. Now, in your second spell at Yorkshire, were you and Mr. Balance friends? And if not, Did he use the P word during your second spell?
Yes, 2017 pre-season tour, and throughout really. It's interesting, and I want to address Gary's statement because there was a narrative there that we were the best of mates. We had a really good relationship. When Gary came to the club from Derby, I saw in him what I saw in myself, and that was outsiders. A lot of the players at the time called Gary a lot of things, which were completely out of order. But again, it was such a norm that no one said anything. Mine and Gary's relationship started to deteriorate around 2013 due to Gary's conduct. It's not, I mean, at one point, his behaviour around his personal relationships was so disgusting that I raised it with an agent that we shared and said this needs to be sorted out before it gets quite silly. And then even after that we were amicable, we were teammates, but we never shared